Welcome to Trending Faith here on GCU TV. My name is Ashley Romantic, and let's get started with a question from Tim, who is a senior here at GCU. There are good people who are not Christians. Is God going to send them to hell? Is that just? I'm going to direct this question towards you, Jason.
That would be a difficult place to start a conversation most of the time because we're so hesitant to be judgmental or to say with any sort of in any sort of a definitive way that someone is good, someone is bad, someone is good enough, someone is not good enough. Let me start by questioning the question, which is that there is such a thing as a good person, Christian or otherwise. And I think that this is actually a central point in the Christian worldview that we have the most difficult time with. Is we sort of begin, our default position is to assume that humans generally are pretty good. That's kind of where people are. But the Christian worldview, by which I mean really the biblical perspective on this, insists that human beings, after the fall into sin, are in no wise good. Jesus himself said, "No one is good but God." And that's a pretty clear statement when we think about goodness or acceptability before God. So if the question is anyone good enough? Are Christians good enough? Are they better than other people? Then the answer is absolutely no. So Christians are not better than other people, nor is there any person who's good enough to be acceptable to God, good or not. And so this raises a ton of questions that are very difficult for us. When we hear we're not good enough, we're not acceptable before God because of our sin. It raises tons of questions. What do you mean by sin? What is sin? Are you judging me? Are you looking down on me? Well, sin itself is a difficult concept, and our culture struggles with it because when we hear the word sin, we tend to think of something that another person is saying about us or about our worldview or about our belief system or our morality. And in reality, sin is not something that I say about Tim, for instance, or Tim would say about me. It's something that God has said about the way we've responded to Him. So if we've rebelled against God, if we have broken faith with God, if we have missed the mark that God set for us, then God has really justly been offended by that. And so sin is an idea that is absolutely critical to grasp, to even make sense of concepts like hell, where you have this final judgment where a person is separated from God. The fact that humans are sinners, the first part of this conversation, is very difficult to begin with. And so there are a couple steps you have to make before you ever come to the point where you begin to talk about people indeed being consigned to hell. That's just so weighty, but also very foreign to where we are culturally. So it's a difficult concept to bring up. You can find clearly in the Bible conversations about humans all having fallen short of the glory of God by virtue of their sin. You find the righteous judgment of sin would be ultimate separation from Himself, which would be being cast into the lake of fire, Gehenna, Hades, hell. All of those things, but when you hear those things, often our culture brings so much baggage to those concepts that it's almost impossible to refer to those concepts and to have people listening understand what in the world you're saying. So the short answer is question the first part of the question. No one is good but God. The second part is just a little bit too heavy to jump into quickly without a bit more conversation.
And did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, it kind of reminds me when Jesus mentioned that He was the way, the truth, and the life, and that no man came to the Father but by Him. Mm-hmm. There's definitely a dividing line there between those who know God and are part of His family and His purpose, and those that aren't. And that's it's related to the question. The subject of hell is a really difficult one to deal with. People don't want anybody to go there, and it seems like all dogs go to heaven is kind of the perception of the general population. But when you start drilling down into Scripture, there's some pretty clear lines that Jesus drew in the sand about those who knew God, those who didn't, and what happens when those don't come to God the Father by way of Jesus, that there is a result. There's a consequence. And I think Jason pretty much nailed it. And I think it's tough for us sometimes to talk about it because it has some pretty dramatic consequences. And that separation from God, has unbelievable eternal ramifications. And that's why believers are so compelled to share the gospel and bring people into a relationship with Jesus Christ. So I appreciate what you had to say, Jason. It was great.
The fact that we don't really understand what it is to be holy, because we're not, makes it very difficult to grasp. But when you think about who God has revealed Himself to be, the purity, the perfection of God, it's sort of overwhelming to think that He would actually open up a way that we might be restored to relationship with Him. So hell is the negative side of that conversation, but the reality, the possibility of heaven is pretty overwhelming. That's a pretty incredible love if you think about it.
Okay, thank you, Tim, for your question. And as always, if you guys have any more questions, please feel free to send them to us at trendingfaith@gcu.edu. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.